All right, let's get the show on the road. Guys, welcome back to another video, and today we are talking about little tips to get you faster at the marathon. Now look, I know we all don't run marathons. Some of us run half marathons, 10Ks, and I think these tips are going to help everyone. So with that, let's get into it. Okay, look, I did say that these are tips to help you run your best marathon or half marathon or even 10K, but the article is specifically about marathon. That is the article that I cited to talk to you guys about today. And I came across this article in Outside Online, their run section, and the article is titled 5 Micro Training Tweaks for Your Fastest Marathon Yet. And the article is by Jason Fitzgerald, and as always, we have to listen to what that guy says. He knows what he's talking about. And even though I think some of these tips, or maybe not tips, but tweaks, that's what the article says. Even though I think some of these tweaks are fairly obvious, maybe this video is just going to help you, maybe to help drive it home so you don't forget it when it's important, when you need to remember it on race day. Or actually, I have already read the article. So in your training leading up to race day as well as race day, there are a few tweaks. So Jason does start out by talking about how difficult the marathon is and yet how approachable it is. And of course, I do realize that if you have already run a marathon, you know how approachable it is. And if you haven't run one or you're trying to build up to it, it may not necessarily seem that approachable because it is difficult. But the point is that millions of people run marathons. And if you haven't run one yet, you can definitely do it. And if you're going to run one, you may as well run it to the best of your ability. Now, the marathon is my favorite event because of the demands that it places on me. I love how strategic it really is. You're not just going out and running as fast as you can. And now that I just heard myself say that, I've realized that ultimately that is exactly what a marathon is. At least if you're trying to be competitive, you are going out and you're trying to run as fast as you can from the start to the finish. But there are nuances. And when you dig a little deeper, it really isn't just that easy. And that's for a couple reasons. Because the distance, at least, it allows us, or it makes us, or it takes from us all our stored glycogen stores. That sounded funny. The marathon is long enough where it's going to deplete all your stored carbohydrates. But Jason points out that it's still short enough where you can run it at a competitive pace without taking any walk breaks. Now, I realize that's not for everyone. Some of us are definitely going to take walk breaks, and that's 100% okay. But if you are going for a specific time, or if, let's say, you're trying to qualify for something, perhaps the Boston Marathon, these tweaks are something, if you're not already doing them, you probably should pay attention to. And if you're not even trying to run a marathon, if you're not trying to qualify for the Boston Marathon, let's be honest, if you're out there and you're running a race, you probably want to get it done with as soon as possible. Which brings us to the first tweak that I want you to make in your next race, and that is to run the tangents. And I feel bad saying it because it's so obvious. We know what we need to do. We know that the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. So if you have a road that goes like this, like an S, and you can run straight through the middle, that's going to be your best bet. And what's more, any certified course is going to be measured this way. It's going to be measured in the shortest possible distance to get from the start to the finish without being disqualified. So if it's a road marathon and it's running on the roads, if the course goes around a corner, the fastest line is going to be cutting the tangent of the corner. And this is easier said than done, because if you go to a big race where there's a lot of people, it's not always easy to take that inside line, because when you're surrounded by hundreds of people, everybody wants to take that inside line. So maybe you'll take one corner on the outside, and then a little later, maybe you'll take the next one on the outside. You might get the next one to run the tangent, but you don't find yourself exactly on that fastest possible line. You might be a couple of feet out. And every time that happens, every time you don't run the tangents, you are extending the distance that you're running. And as we've already established, no one who goes out and runs a race wants to run longer than the race. And look, on some courses it's going to be easier than others. Think of the Boston Marathon, right? It starts down in Hopkinton, it goes up to Boston, and it's a relatively straight line. But when you're out on the course, it's really not as straight as it looks on screen right now. Some of the roads on the Boston Marathon course are definitely winding. And there are a few places where you do have to make some sharp-ish turns. And if you're running on the outside of those turns, well, you're just wasting time. But then we look at some other races, and in some other races where there are some more turns, it increases the chances that you're going to have to not run the tangents and therefore run a lot further than you need. So let's look at the London Marathon. There are a lot of turns. Definitely a lot of chances in the London Marathon for you to run further than you absolutely have to. If we look at the Berlin Marathon, again, there are a lot of turns that need to be made. So on races like this, you really have to be dialed into running the tangents. And then if we look at Tokyo, Tokyo is just a mess of out and backs. So if on each one of those turns and out and backs, you run on the outside, like I don't know how much further you'd run, but you'd run a lot further. But I think that's enough about tangents. We all know we have to run them. Sometimes it's easier than others, but we've got to keep those tangents in the back of our head so we can attack them when we see them. All right, the second tweak for your best possible marathon time is to carb load before the race. And this is some well baked in runner's lore. Years ago, races would put on these big extensive pasta dinners before the races because they wanted you to carb load like the night before the race. And look, they were on the right line back then, right? We know that our body can only hold about 20 miles of glycogen. So by maxing out our carbohydrate stores, we are giving ourselves the best possible chance that we can to cover those 20 miles and not fuel more than we need to. right? That's the thought behind it. And Jason pointed out in this article that there was actually a depletion phase that was thought to be necessary before you built your carb stores right back up. And of course, we now know that the depletion phase is not necessary, but we still have to carb load. But my friends, you are not going to leave it to just the night before. You're going to do it over the days before your race. And the article suggests between 8 and 10 grams of carbohydrates per kilogram of body weight, and to kind of follow that carbohydrate loading protocol over the days before your race. And this means that most of your calories before your race are going to be coming from carbohydrates. So between 80 and 90%, that's a lot of carbs. I've got to tell you, I don't actually look at any of the weight of carbs that I'm eating. I've kind of gotten to the point in my running where I just kind of eat what I want to eat. Maybe I'll eat a little more leading up to a marathon, and because I'm eating a little more, I will just excuse that with the carb loading excuse. Oh, I think it also helps that I do eat a very carb heavy diet in general. But this is the first time I want to hear from you. When you are carb loading for a race, what's your favorite thing to eat? Or even better, what is the most bizarre thing that you eat to carb load before a race? Are we talking pancakes or waffles for every meal? Sounds pretty good to me, but I want to know. Drop it in the comments. The third tweak to your marathon training that is going to make you run even better is the fuel during the marathon. Now, we already said about carb loading before the race that our bodies can hold about 20 miles worth of carbohydrates or glycogen. So what happens when you run out? Well, you're not going to run out because you would have been fueling the entire time. And you're going to be fueling the entire time because you need to make up for that shortfall. Now, of course, we're all going to be different, and what works for me isn't going to work for you, but I have found that a small breakfast followed by a gel or a pack of blocks just before the race, and then taking another gel or some blocks every 40 minutes or so seems to work well for me. Now, the article actually suggests that you should take between 50 and 60 grams of carbohydrates every half an hour throughout your race. And the article points out that this equates to between 5 and 9 gels per runner during the course of a marathon, so you feel as energetic as possible throughout the entire race. And yeah, I think I can agree with that. I think that's probably where I fit. But I can also tell you that when you get towards the end of a race and you've had that many gels, like, they really don't taste good anymore. I find I get very tired of gels towards the end of a marathon. And especially when I get within a couple of miles of the finish and I know I need to take another gel, it's probably more likely that I'm going to skip that gel just because I just don't feel like eating it. And of course, I want to hear from you. What is your favorite way to fuel? Is it gels? Is it blocks? Is it bars? Liquid fueling? Drop a comment and let me know. The fourth tweak to make your best marathon time ever is to start slow and finish fast. And we know this, right? We've had this bashed over our heads the entire time that we've been running. We know that all the world records are run by a negative split. We know that we can't start off too fast. We even know that we are going to be tempted to start off too fast because of how good we feel, because of the taper, because of everyone around us is giving us energy, and we just want to run faster than we should. We know this is going to happen. We know that the best results happen if we don't do that, and yet a lot of us, and by a lot of us I'm referring to me, still do it at a lot of races. Most races. Okay, now there's two reasons why you shouldn't do that, why you shouldn't start too fast. And the first is when you start too fast too early, it puts too much mechanical stress on your body, because you know that when the faster you run, the more impact forces are generated, and those impact forces are going into your muscles and your skeletal system, and it's a lot for them to absorb. And while this may happen later on during the race, if we increase that mechanical stress too early on our bodies, we're going to be creating early micro tears and small amounts of muscle damage, and when we do that, it's only going to get worse as the race goes on. Second, when you start the race too early, you are going to burn through those glycogen stores quicker than you should. And if you have really planned out your long run fueling strategy and you have only brought the exact amount of gels that you are going to need to finish the race, because you know through your training how far you can run and you've calculated how many grams of carbohydrates you need. If you start too fast, you're going to be burning that glycogen at an increased rate, and then your whole calculation is going to be off. I'm not really making it sound like it's that big of a deal, but it really is. Because if you're not fueling enough because you're burning too much glycogen, and you bonk because you're not taking in enough carbohydrates, there is no getting back from that bonk. Nobody bonks and then recovers to run a good race. It's just not possible. The reason that we're fueling is to push off the bonk. And the article actually suggests avoiding this by running the first 2 miles of your marathon at slightly slower than your goal race pace. And by doing that, you're just helping your body warm up. You're holding yourself back so you're not going to be overburning your glycogen stores, and then you can slowly build up to that race pace. Next up, the fifth tweak to make your best marathon possible is to prioritize your pre-season long run. Now, I think this is probably the best one, or at least this is the one that I wasn't most aware of. I hadn't heard it 100 times before, but the article lets us know that oftentimes success in the marathon is built before the actual marathon training specifically begins. So a lot of times marathoners will build up their training plan in, let's say, a 16-week cycle, and they'll build up those long runs from about 10 miles all the way up to 20 miles. Now, Jason points out in the article that this strategy is absolutely fine if your goal is to finish a marathon. And by the way, that's a fine goal. If that's your goal, keep it. But if your goal is to achieve a certain time standard or you're running competitively, more advanced long runs are needed. And Jason does point out that performance-oriented runners need more frequent long runs in the 18 to 20 mile range in order to build that specific fitness that is required to carry you over the marathon distance as fast as you can go. And in the article, which of course I'm going to link in the show notes below, there is another link to a study that actually supports that. And the study shows a few hundred half marathoners and marathoners and how when they run longer runs and they run more weekly volume, their performance at whatever race they're going for, be it the half marathon or the marathon, is faster than the people that don't run as longer long runs or don't have as high a weekly volume. What I thought was really interesting about that study, because I know we were talking about half marathoners maybe a couple of weeks ago on one of these videos, but the study found that half marathoners that ran over 21 kilometers as their long run had faster finish times than half marathoners that actually didn't cover that 21 kilometer distance. So if you are a half marathon runner, if you're trying to get the best out of yourself, you probably need to be running a half marathon at least as your long run. So now I want to hear from you. Do you prioritize your pre-season long run? Do you start slow in the marathon so you can finish hopefully fast? Do you fuel during the marathon? Do you carb load before your marathon? And do you run the tangents? Drop a comment and let me know. And if you have made it till this point in the video, first of all, thank you very much. I want you to drop that little pink purse emoji in the comments just so I know that you made it till this point in the video. And why did I choose the little pink purse? Well, I chose it because it has nothing to do with this video, so there'll be no guessing as to which emoji I'm choosing. And if you have also made it to this point in the video and you're not already subscribed, I would love it if you would subscribe, maybe turn on notifications, give this video a like. And I know I really should be asking for these things much earlier in the video because I know there's only like 5 or 6 of you that actually watched to this point. So for each of you, thank you very much. And with that, it's Matt V. This has been a video on some little tweaks to make your marathon time potentially a little better. Be kind, be happy, run well. I'll see you in a couple of days.